So one of the things that you look at is how people decide how we're going to handle this problem. So what the solution is depends on who is asking the question and what their view of the problem is. Is addiction sin? Is addiction disease? Is addiction a maladaptive behavior? Is addiction koyaanisqatsi? Is addiction slavery? So take, for example, sin. Who talks about sin? Religion. Huh?
I was going to say originally Jesus, but I guess...
No, it was before him.
Oh yeah, I guess we talked about sin before.
Yeah.
Oh, I meant forgiveness of sin. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, right. So anyway, sin is a religious concept. But this particular view is also shared not only by the religious community, but also by the justice system. Okay? So taking religion out of it, sin is willful misbehavior. You know the right thing to do, and you just doing the wrong thing because you just bad. You willfully misbehaving. So, then the solution is what? What do we do with people who are willfully misbehaving? Punish them. Boom. Okay, so I wasn't going to go there, but I'll have to because I'm just reporting because of the whole thing with religious institutions not being either science-based or whatever. So, I'm not going to identify the religion or the person, but basically, let's just say that these people, these kids, female children, were abused by their father, who was, let's say, an authority figure in a local church. And he undertook to teach them sex education by having sex with them and demonstrating those kind of things, which is against the teachings of that particular church. But that didn't happen because he was an authority figure within the church. Now, I'm a mandatory reporter. So, when that was disclosed to me, called SCF, what were we calling them then? We were calling them CSD, now it's DHS. Okay, called them, called the cops. And they called the cops. Boom. Kids are taken out of the home. Dad comes to the school, he's angry. Principal's dealing with him. No, I'm backing Mark up, he's a mandatory reporter. You know, we got a convict on the guy. He went to prison. Now, they're part of a religious community, obviously, if he's an authority figure. What would the response of the church be to that family, you think? What should it be? Let's start there.
Discussed. Maybe with the guy.
Discussed with the guy, but what should they do with the family? The wife and the kids that have been kind of traumatized here. What should...
They should come to their comfort.
Yeah.
Should come for their comfort, particularly if they're following a Christian-esque framework, right?
Right.
They got excommunicated. Because the sins of the father go to the family. So they're cut off from any search or support from the church that they grew up in. Now, what if that had been a priest in Catholicism? And what we know is, okay, we just moved the priest. Okay? So, addiction is sin. What if the addict is one of your authority figures, which we've seen? Who gets help? Well, the church should help you and does not. Wish that was only a one-time event that I could report. But it's not. So that's why I'm saying, okay, communities of survivors, et cetera, might have to do their own help if need be. Because you still have, and that's part of the process that you work out going from pain, loss, and fear, depression, anger, to serenity. Working through that, getting your own help yourself. The people that are supposed to help you don't. is addiction disease? So basically, we worked under this policy that addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction was sin from the founding of this country up until 1956. When the American Medical Association decided that alcoholism was a disease, not a moral failing. All right, and 1956 definitely is within, I mean, I was 2, but, you know, that's not very long to have a policy change of centuries. So we say alcoholism or other addiction, drug addiction is a disease. All right? So if it's a disease, what do you do with disease? You treat it. Now, unfortunately, what happened, or fortunately, either way, okay, say defining it as a disease means it's not a moral thing, it's a chemical, biological process with psychological ramifications, and you use treatment, but what we used to treat it was 12-step, which was not a scientifically based framework. Okay? So, scientists don't like, okay, 90 meetings in 90 days. Is that therapy? We need something else. So, they come up with a maladaptive behavior. Mal meaning bad, adaptive. This is a bad adaptation to a problem, a bad adaptation. And the idea is we're teaching you skills to deal with your self-medication. Self-medication is where we get maladaptive behavior, that framework. That's where that comes from. The medical community who wasn't down with the higher power thing. Okay, how much higher power do you put in a bottle? Doesn't work for them. Right? So we want things that you can replicate. Maladaptive behavior. We'll give you skills to identify that. But here's a challenge with maladaptive behavior. There are certain things that are not within that construct. Okay? Because Western medicine is only so old. So there are people, so is addiction koyaanisqatsi. So koyaanisqatsi is a Hopi word which has 13 different translations into English. The primary one that people use is life out of balance, or a crazy life. Life that is in need of changing. And you're acting this way because you're out of balance. And they would basically say that, you know, most of Western civilization, particularly in America, is out of balance with your inner nature as well as nature. So the way to if addiction is a result of koyaanisqatsi, then the solution becomes get yourself back into balance. So you don't need anything outside of yourself. And then an African American, so comes out of Native American science. And then out of African American science, we say addiction is slavery. Now we say addiction is slavery is because, like slavery, addiction is well supported. There's tons of money behind keeping it in place. Just like slavery was maintained because people made money from it. And slaves had to basically free themselves. And there was that little thing with the Civil War, but yeah. But that slaves have to free themselves by desiring freedom enough to practice freedom internally. And then teaching other people to do that. So reason why I put it this way, you know, you can see from my excellent suntan, I believe that there's a lot of money behind addiction, and that you are being induced to be in an addictive state for other people's money. Maybe you don't want to do that. But I'm coming from that point of view. That's my bias. So you can see, if addiction is sin, the solution is punishment and incarceration. That's 500 years old. If addiction is a disease, the solution is 12-step-based treatment. 50 to 70 years old, addiction is a maladaptive behavior. Then the solution is evidence-based practices, things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which teaches you to see your behavior as self-medication and teaches you skills or gives you pills, which is less than 53 years old. So for example, even though this is the treatment, this is not the treatment class, this is essentially what happens when we talk about how many of you worship the tobacco god? I know that you're not supposed to do it on campus, but how many of you worship the tobacco god? Okay. So, nicotine resembles the chemical acetylcholine. And so these folks, this is in scientific English, so don't say speak English. It is English. Our laboratory is interested in the structure and function of enzymes and receptors involved in neurotransmission. In particular, we have been studying functional coupling of receptors to cellular responses, specificity of ligand reception by acetylcholine receptors and acetylcholinesterase, and the structure of cholinesterases and nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. A second area of investigation involves the regulation of expression of the genes encoding these proteins during differentiation and synaptogenesis in neurons and skeletal muscle.
Can I get simpler?
Did they figure it out?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, they're studying it. I mean, and they're learning more. But essentially, what they're looking at is where would nicotine addiction begin? Does it begin in the embryo? I mean, the embryo is not smoking. But the physiological basis supporting addictions coming from somewhere. Differentiation is where, you started from 2 cells that start dividing up. At what point does the nervous system start forming, and at what point should we develop, because where this worldview is coming from is there a pill or a patch that we can use to break addiction? That's where they're coming from, right? In scientific jargon, among other things. Now, I'm just showing you this, not because you need to know this, but understand the worldview of the people who are self-medicating, giving you pills. Their solution is pills, and they have lots of science to base that conclusion on. So I'll explain that later. So I'm just showing how intricate the science is. So the science alone doesn't give you a personal solution unless you understand it, which, since you have doctors and nurses and other people that get addicted to drugs, maybe their scientific knowledge is not enough to prevent them from getting strung out. So, doesn't teach you how to deal with your nicotine cravings during your quit phases. So, hence the focus at your level, the civilian level, on lifestyle changes based on simple formula. If you want to know this, do this. If this happens, do this. Right? So hence those assignments cleverly disguised as self-help exercises. The social recons I've gotten so far are on track, so good. Keep up the good work. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm just confused, like when you go through recovering from alcohol or any sort of drug, then a lot of the recovering addicts smoke cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Like in rehab and stuff. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why are the counselors not okay with it? But I feel like it's just a transfer of addiction.
Yes, you're right. But you don't have to convince me. I'm a radical non-smoker. In high school, I was known for, you smoke in front of me, I will destroy your pack. But here's the thing. Alcohol and most other street drugs will kill you pretty quickly. Nicotine takes 20 years to kill you. There's also this other thing about, that's pretty much the rationale, if there is a rationale. I mean, I'm with you. You should just cold turkey quit from everything, but I'm radical. So what they tend to do is, okay, since the street drugs and alcohol and the pills will kill you quicker, we'll get you off of those first, And then once you're stabilized after 1 to 2 years, then you begin your nicotine quit. Which makes some sense. And there's actually some science to back that up. Right? Because since, it does take 20 years to kill you, we got some time. Unless, of course, you've been smoking for 20 years already. So that's part of it. Right. The national drugs of AA or NA are, nicotine and coffee. There's a risk-benefit ratio. Right? So if addiction is Koyaanisqatsi, solution is restoring and creating new balance. So that's 4,000 plus years old. And it's part of what we call community-defined evidence, a pre-contact cultural tradition. If addiction is slavery, then the solution is liberation through self-knowledge and accessing the amenta. That is the Egyptian word for the store of inner spiritual knowledge that every human possesses. And freeing yourself. So that's 5,000 to 10,000 years old, and it's also community-defined evidence of dynastic diasporic tradition and innovation. So we've done this already. No we haven't. Just looked like it. All right, so various religions, spiritual disciplines, creative and martial arts. Copy that. Note that there is a relationship between your mood and your breathing. So most often we've been domesticated to rely on external sources for our mood. So, for example, food affects mood, and we acknowledge this through that term, comfort food. So food, alcohol, television, pharmaceutical drugs, street drugs, church, dancing, music are all used to affect mood, and they all have an effect on how you breathe. Hence the skill of teaching you breath work first. Not as the only technique, but if you master that one, then many others fall into place. Okay, so in addiction, you put the control outside of you. Natural mind develops the conscious internal controls. If you think of, as I try and do, think of human culture, like 100 years is like equivalent to 1 year of human life. America's a 2-year-old. 2-year-olds with nukes. Now. Okay, Western civilization is less than 1,000 years old. 2-year-olds with nukes operating on a knowledge base of a 10-year-old. Chinese would be 57. Natives would be 40. I'd listen to the adults in the room, on the global stage, before they try and become like us with fancy toys. But that's just me. And just not that there's no addictions in China, because yeah, there are. So feed yourself food for thought instead of actual food. Hydrate. So now, if you are medicated, don't raise your hand. If you're medicated, don't throw away your medications and simply breathe. You still have to breathe anyway. The breath is free. Might as well try and breathe consciously, because conscious attention to the breath is an effective practice in a number of areas. So you can either have mind or mood altering chemicals, or mind or mood altering practices, which we'll learn about. So I'll close with this. This is adapting Western psychology to a Native American construct. Look at the effect on, let's start with your spirit your mind, your body, and your emotions. So, natural mind divides the human being into 4 aspects. They're actually 1, but we divide them to talk about them. The breath technique affects all aspects simultaneously. So a healthy culture would have taught you this by the time you were taught basic hygiene. And this is kind of like mental, emotional hygiene. You tell 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds, use your words. Use your words. We tell you, watch your breath. And I don't mean using gum. Not the smell of it. Watch your breath. All right, so we will continue. Yeah, I'll take your papers.
All your papers in order.
Hi. Oh, the forest fire? In Oak Ridge? Where is our sisters?
Yeah.